Okay. If you didn't come in at the beginning and hear me, I do answer all my mail. My address is on adams.org. I answer right away. I've never not answered a letter. So if you did not get an answer, something happened with the post. And sometimes the Canadian post is not as fast as some of the other postal services. Having written every province in Canada, I have some experience. Okay, I want to first give an understanding why I feel qualified to speak about joy. It's not because I'm a philosopher, but it's a personal experience thing. I will just briefly say that in my youth, I had a fabulous mother, a military father. He died as a soldier when I was 16. I had grown up outside the U.S. on military bases. I was not a manly man. I was a weird nerd, dweeb, dork, sissy boy. I'm still probably the geezer form of that. And I was beaten up a lot as a child by bullies. When I came back to the U.S. to the South in '61, the South was segregated. In the land of the free, their black population did not have basic rights to use drinking fountains and toilets, and restaurants and hotels. And because my mother gave me ethics, I had an immediate reaction, not a mature one. I wept and hid under my bed for some days and realized my country was fake and religion was fake and the adult world was an embarrassment. I had 2 years of high school left, and I was beaten up almost every day in my last 2 years because I took a stand. I could not be silent. And there was a lot of noise in 61 through 63. You saw the movie. It starts with me in a mental hospital. They couldn't make Robin look 17. He was 42. So they quote Dante to try to give you a context for middle age. The truth is, I was hospitalized 3 times in mental hospitals for wanting to kill myself at 17. I was not good at killing myself. And between the second and third, I was present at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and I saw 1 million nonviolent revolutionaries. And I realized that you don't kill yourself when you don't like what's happening, you make revolution. And in the mental hospital, my third one, in 1963, I made 2 decisions that have shaped my life ever since then. One was to serve humanity in medicine. I've been a free doctor. I've never made any money in medicine in 43 years. The other was a very personal one. How can I be an instrument for peace and justice and care in every moment that I never spend any time awake where I'm not working for it? And so I thought what I would be is radiantly, disgustingly happy all of the time, and to be a presence of joy wherever I go. And I can honestly say that it's true that I've done that without any interruption for 51 years. So I am an experienced, happy person. I am disgustingly happy in horrible situations and in joyful ones. So I'm going to give you my bias, which is extremely strong. What is happiness? I'm going to say it's that state of being where one's celebration of life is obvious by their actions. I'm not speaking of inner peace. I'm saying you're so damned happy it shows. I'm also not speaking about a moment in time, like a wedding or a graduation. I'm saying joy is a platform from which you launch your life. You are happy. How do you spend it? I'm not talking about happiness as a reward for something. I will be happy when she kisses me. I will be happy when I win the lottery or am cured of my cancer. I'm saying you clearly notice the privilege it is to be alive and don't want to insult it by having a bad day. The short form is, if you have food and a friend, what are you bitching about? So how did we get here? How is it that while living, we're suffering? It makes sense in the context of war or starvation that might be difficult, but most suffering occurs when there's actually not a cause. My interpretation of history is when we moved out of having any matriarchal societies and started ownership of land and building towns and cities, that the male patriarchal society basically took over, and that its value system is nested in greed and power over others. I believe that's why no political system has ever worked, because the value system has been greed and power over. And that's at least 5,000 years old. And in that context, it's very easy to see how sadness and happiness is really possible. If you look at our histories, the ancient Greek histories, Thucydides and Herodotus, there are no chapters on fun times we had back then. There's no chapters on good recipes, dance steps, or how we celebrated a birthday. They're about war and what the winners did to the losers, which were usually really bad things. And that's how histories were written. And it's not that there probably weren't any happy times, but this was what was singled out as what was important in history. If you look at our religions, however much the founders and creators of those religions were, and we can take Buddhism and Christianity as examples, their life is suffering, and there is some way you can move to get through that or cope with it. The worst offenders today are the media. Never in history was there a daily newspaper anywhere on good news. And yet every day, more good news happens every day than bad news. In fact, the headline every day is, "I woke up." Because if you didn't, you died. Every day. And often it takes you being really sick to notice, wow, those were some really good days back in those bad days. We love bad news. We just can't get enough bad news and suffering. The Washington area, which is the area I've lived most of my life in, it's a major newspaper, and one of the major newspapers, they say, in the United States, the front section is the international horrible murders, wars, and miserable international events. Then there's the local news, which are the local murders and horrible things that people are doing to each other. There's the business section, where Walmart has once again taken over a particular area. And then the sports section, which of course is multi-millionaires playing with their balls. And somehow that's interesting to people. In fact, we pay them millions of dollars to play with their balls. Another male trick. We love pain and suffering. I'm fascinated by what happens and just how easy it is for people to be miserable. That you can go on an elevator and nobody talks to each other. That's the majority of elevator experiences. You can make different elevator experiences, but the typical, there are no rules in elevators except weight, right? X number of kilos, and no one's thinking kilos. They probably, if you're in the US, they don't even know how many kilos they are. That's the only rule. The rule isn't, okay, the door opens, turn around and show people your butt. Okay, that's certainly a gesture, but it's not very community building. And it doesn't acknowledge that you're existing, actually. And wherever you look, you can see this celebration. You can go on a big city street and see 200 people in one block masterfully avoiding everyone else. Where in a joyful, interdependent society, it may take an hour and a half to go one block. When people aren't so much in a hurry and know that connecting is such a different world. It is amazing as you take a really close look at life, how quick people are to suffer and how much they enjoy it. I love my profession of medicine. It's so interesting, because they expect when you go to a specialist that they're an expert. So that the psychiatrist is the expert on mental health. Now that's interesting. There isn't one psychiatric textbook in the world that has one sentence on mental health. A psychiatric residency is 4 years. That's a lot of hours if you multiply 24 hours a day. I haven't found a single psychiatric residency in the world, and I'm sure there might be one. I keep hoping to be challenged. But I've spoken to maybe 40 or 50 million people in my 30 years on the road and haven't found a single psychiatric residency that has 1 hour discussion on mental health. And if you go to a psychiatric convention, you might understand why. Because it's not like a radiant group of mentally healthy people all thriving in their mental health. So even the experts on mental health get no training in it. We get a huge amount of training in being miserable, and so little training in being joyful. It's so often related to some kind of reward. And that's why I think it's an issue. This was the second of the 50 presentations I did, because when I started to present, I wondered, what did I have to offer? Because I'm not interested in what I make from the talk. I'm interested in actually infecting people. And I knew as a physician, in my 48 years of doing 4-hour interviews with people, hugely, many thousands, less than 5% had any idea what a day-to-day vitality for life was about. Yay, life. Yay, life. On their worst day, of course, yay, life. And that's why I do this workshop. This celebration of pain and suffering, I call it the pain paradigm, has dominated our global society for 5,000 years. Okay, what can I say about joy? Not much. It's a choice. You wake up in the morning, what shirt will I put on? What personality will I be? Today I'm going to be happy. That's it. You decided, and you go and do it. I am sure I never made anybody happy. I'm sure I never made anybody sad. Things happen to you, and you decide what your response to them are going to be. If I could sprinkle happy dust on people, I'd do it on all 7+ billion people, even if they're screaming me not to. But regrettably, I don't have any happy dust to sprinkle on people. I also don't want to imply that it is an ethical or moral thing. Good to be happy.
Happy, nice guy. Bad to be sad, horrible person.
Man, it's not that. It's just a damned old choice. Ah, ding, 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 ding. Oh my gosh, show me the data. It's good for you. Holy schmoly. In the entire history of science, there has not been a single paper showing any value ever to being serious. And yet, in the US, adults want to be taken seriously. How like an adult, even though there's no data, to want to be something there's no data for. There's not a single paper ever having, thank you, any value to being rude, unkind, nasty, mean, violent. No data that it's ever good for you. Ever. None of those things are ever good for you. There's no data for it. And you can bet that if there was data, they would love it. Oh, it would explain everything. Thousands of papers in the biochemistry and physiology, sociology, psychology, showing incredible value to being happy, to being loving, to being funny, creative, to being in a healthy community. It's good for you. You don't even have to like it, but you're doing it because it's good for you. I hate exercising, but it's good for me. It's good for you biochemically and physiologically to be happy. Now, don't believe the research. I'm going to suggest that you do your own experiments. Okay. I'm old school since I've never used a computer or an iPhone, but many of you, I'm sure, have an iPhone. I would be a pad of paper and a pencil person. I want you to do a 2-month study, okay? First month, be miserable. Okay, strictly for scientific study. You know, you wake up with your partner in the morning and you look over and go, who the hell are you? And you write in your journal, how did it go? You know, how did I feel? How did they feel? You know, you go into the bathroom, you look in the mirror, ah, me! Write it down, you know, how did that feel? You go downstairs, you kick the dog, you tell the kids to get their own breakfast, you know, you slam the door, you're honking all the way to work, strictly for scientific study to figure out what is it really like? Because usually when you're miserable, you're not studying it. You know, you're just being miserable. Okay, so here you're actually trying to study. What are the effects? And, you know, you walk in your office door and you kind of slam it on the old person behind you. And, you know, you're just going through your life miserable. And keeping close data on, you know, cigarettes smoked and seat belts hooked and how your life went that month. And then next month, be a pussycat. You are loving life, strictly for scientific study. You are loving life, so you wake up with your partner, and a poem comes to mind. You call in sick, you take 2 days off. You know, and you just write it down. How did that feel, you know? You go into the bathroom, you look yourself in the mirror. You know, you go downstairs, you make breakfast for everybody, you're late for work because you pet your dog and your 2 cats. You drive along, you do a lot of paying it forward at the toll booth, and you pay for the 5 people behind you, and it takes an hour and a half to get into work because you're holding the door for all the people. You're just going through life loving life and strictly for study. How's it feel? How was my day? And you're taking close tabs, because at the end of those 2 months, you go, now, what do I want? Do I want the miserable life or the happy life? Because I tricked you. Because you did both of them. So I didn't have to show you how to do them. You already showed yourself you can do it. And then all it really takes is deciding what you're going to do. There are 3 parts of the celebration of pain and suffering that really concern me and have really taken most of my medical life, and those are loneliness, boredom, and fear. It's absolutely clear to me as a family doctor that there is no suffering like loneliness. It is the worst human experience. Whether you're talking about suicides or murders or whatever suffering people do, loneliness is the worst pain that I've experienced in people. In fact, one of the things that the medical community does not like me saying is that depression is never an illness. There is no such illness as depression. Depression is a symptom of loneliness. How do you know you have a friend? You cannot be depressed. Because you know, if you think of your friend, you cannot be depressed. That's what a friend is. In the same way they speak about God. The Christian community speaks about being full of the Spirit. No one talks about half full. How do you know you have God? You cannot be depressed. You have to put your friend or God on the shelf, and then you can be miserable. That's what a friend is. Not Francoise check. It's Francoise. That's if you're in a grocery store. That's really important to know. And that's what the 4th exercise was. You paired off with somebody you don't know. I'd like you to raise your hand if you found yourself liking the person you were with. Now you can look to see if the person...
I'm glad you raised your hand.
Let's imagine that you like the person. That was 7 minutes. Okay, you went from stranger to liking the person in 7 minutes. Well, you each had 7 minutes. And I would suggest, when I think of the people I'm closest to, it usually happened that quickly. That it's a listening exercise. I know it sounded like a talking exercise. We're so much better talkers than we are listeners. And you can do that anywhere, right? You go in a cafe. One of the exercises I recommend to people is look around the cafe and see who is the person I would least likely sit with. And then go sit with them. Once you've engaged 1,000 people in conversation, the world is yours. Did I say 1,000? Yeah. I did say 1,000 because, much like any skill, it takes time to slide into it. But you're in the grocery store line. There's a person in front of you and in back of you. The only confusion is who to start with to engage the world. That you can mean, don't I trick people by saying I answer all my mail? I write 120 countries. I regularly correspond with about 1,600 people. I like people. I found that whenever I interviewed somebody, whenever I sat down at that cafe or whatever I was doing, that it went somewhere that I liked. That conversation, exchanging ideas, being present with a person can be really wonderful. And I mentioned last night, we're tribal animals. We are not solitary animals. I think the dumbest sociological move in history was the nuclear family. It doesn't work in any country. It is a failed institution. It doesn't mean that there aren't some people good at it. Most are not. And it's because we really are in our natural state in a community of people. And there's no real provision for that unless you pursue it by pursuing an ashram or pursuing a commune, co-housing, co-op. These are all directions towards being tribal. The idea of the individual, I, me, is a new philosophical concept in human history, and it doesn't work. We are tribal, and that loneliness is an indication for that experience. The smartest thing I ever did in my life was to start a commune in 1971. Everything that I've done that I've liked has happened through community, through groups of people. This morning and last night are examples. This is a group of us in a moment. How safe we were to weave our bodies on the floor with a bunch of strangers. It's a trip, you understand. What if we yelled it out at a subway stop? Everybody on the floor, let's weave our bodies. In a clown costume, you can do those things. Remember, for me, clowning is just a trick to get that love close, as I mentioned last night. So the loneliness thing, you cannot be happy alone. You can say you are or pretend you are, and if I watched you, I would point out how you're not. And it was interesting, the hospital I described, the 12 years we were a home that was so crowded it was impossible not to engage in people, that it was that intensity that made it possible for us to never give psychiatric medications and to do almost anything anyone thought up because there were people ready to do them, much as you were ready to do the exercises this morning. And I've done enough strange exercises to know you can actually get people to do anything if they're feeling safe. And we certainly have experimented with what those edges are. So practice connecting. In fact, if there's somebody next to you in your life, why not practice connecting? Find out how to engage and feel that the whole of humanity is your brother and sister. It can be a philosophical thought first, and then it can be the way you behave. Boredom. At our hospital, we consider boredom to be a medical emergency. Basically, when you say I'm bored, you're saying I'm dead. For me, it's clearly a statement, you have no brain. How I know you have a brain is that you're not bored. You cannot be having a brain and be bored at the same time. I have no personal experience with boredom. I actually have tried to be bored, and I have failed. Because as soon as you're studying something called boredom, it's interesting. Shit, you damn. I ache that the modern young person of the United States is saying they're bored often. I think of the television as the worst invention of the 20th century, even worse than the atomic bomb. It has made the United States stupid. I think less than 10% of the citizens of the U.S. ever think. That's what I mean by thinking. They never, literally never do it. They have the capacity to do it, and they do not do it. It is a process, and if you're not doing the process, it's like loving. It's not there unless you're loving. It's a verb, thinking. And boredom is a beautiful instrument of social control. Wow, if you can get people to sit in front of a TV 5 hours a day, you as a government can do anything you want. Because people are vegging out and making their mind a zero. The idea that you have nothing to think about is inconceivable to me. Nothing to remember, no one to think about, nothing to remember, nothing to anticipate. In my mind, that would be worse than death. At least death, you're not thinking about it. You're not experiencing that. You know, there is so much to be interested in. I like poetry, so I know 4 hours of poetry by heart. I only memorize poems I hope to say at least 10,000 times. I might shove some down your throat, if I may. To be interested. Words like wonder and curiosity and passion, these are the words that prevent boredom. If you are not filled with wonder and full of curiosity, you have turned off your essence. And that's what my government wants. They want a thoughtless, non-resisting consumer. And you can only do that without a brain. And then you don't need a Gestapo because their brain is turned off. They won't resist. So throw away your television. I'm sorry. It is a horrible, deadly instrument. I don't know how anyone with a brain can put their butt down on the sofa and watch a TV show, given the other options. For example, if you have a partner, try kissing. When in doubt, when you reach for the TV, reach in another way. Fear. Fear was a great idea. Wow, fear. Yeah, baby. Back in those days when there was a saber-toothed tiger over there, fear said, get out of here. Particularly if they looked hungry. Or run with an old, slow deer. You may not know this, but the gazelles know to run next to a slower gazelle. If you study group animals, they cover fear with their groupness. So if you're familiar with the meerkat, a lovely mammal from Africa, they live underground as a tribe, and they stay underground until they say, okay, everybody out for volleyball. And then they all run outside and they're eating and playing, except some of them, and they're strange-looking animals when they stand on their hind legs and they're checking things out. Not everybody, a few. kind of like a mother of 6 children after the father left. You know, that they're honing, they're looking for raptors, birds that eat them, and hyenas. And the others are all playing. They don't have to think about it, because as soon as a signal is given, they're all back underground again. And that kind of fear is a really positive thing. It means you're not dinner. In the modern era, fear has become, one of our favorite states. Fear for fear's sake. And even panic attacks. What a fabulous kind of a free Stephen King thing. That you can have fear and not have anything you're afraid of. It certainly is hard to fall asleep. You're awake. It'd be nice to control it a little bit. We need to feel connected, and then we lose the fear that is diagnosable and treated with anti-anxiety medication. We don't need to be frightened if we're in a collective of friends. It doesn't mean you won't fear something. I actually think all the emotions are good, that the emotions are the sense organs of the mind. They're not something to sit in, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, or I'm sad. That the emotions, when thinking was evolutionarily created, that the emotions were there as sense organs to help direct where the thinking is going. And so if you're unhappy with something, the point is not to be unhappy, but to have it go to your thinking and that you deal with it, solve it. So that if you're in a relationship with somebody and they make you unhappy, the point is not to spend the next 3 months not talking to each other. Duh. But that instant, your mind says, hey, something should be talked about now. Yeah, yay, now. And then you don't hear. How many of you have heard actually from somebody that something that happened 20 years ago, they're still angry at it? Isn't that heaven? Wow. So be thankful for the emotions. Just don't sit in them. Have this moment's emotion and be creating it as you can. Okay, I want to say something about the exercises. The first exercise, be a piece of furniture. I'm curious, was anyone an odd piece of furniture? There were some rugs I saw, lamps. Were there some chairs? Table? Ottoman. Ottoman. What was the ottoman?
Just like this.
All right, ottoman. Yes. Grandfather clock. Were you tick-tocking?
With the eyes.
Part of why I do that is that obviously a piece of furniture is an inanimate object, and the point is nothing has to happen for you to be happy. You were born. You're alive. That is, if you have food and a friend, the rest is luxury. And so to be a piece of furniture, nothing has to happen for you to be happy. But also it gives you something fun to do with friends. If you can be with a group of friends that goes out different places during the course of the year, you can have signals like 47. 47 would mean you all assume a piece of furniture. You're at a restaurant or something, and you just that you do things like that. And that's one of the nice uses of community, is to play in life. Or that if you have to wait in line for an hour, be an ottoman. And people say, "Oh, what are you doing? You have cramps or something?" "No, no, I'm an Ottoman." "Could use a rug." And you can see if the people in the line will join you in your madness. And I promise you, they do join you, okay? One of the opportunities in life is that if you have the inviting personality, twinkle in the eye, smile on the face, willingness to greet, then you can get people to do things you would not believe. And these are strangers or people from other countries. You can get really good as a conductor. The next exercise was an exercise where you stood in circles and you were freezing a greeting. And part of that is say you're not inanimate, you are alive. When you are amongst people, are you greeting? Are you a greeting as you walk down the street? Or are you angry or absorbed in something? Are you there and present? Are you greeting, in fact, the world? Hello, world. You can even do that. Walk down the street going, "Hello, world! Oh, bonjour, bonjour." And you won't be arrested. You know, that. And you would be amazed at how much fun a street can be if you're deciding to be present and engaging and maybe even healing of the street through your greeting. And of course, this idea of being frozen and sending the vibration. We don't even know what the hell a vibration is, right? We can talk about it, and a lot of the community, as I understand and see the books here and get a sense of this community, that vibration thing is really explored more than the other people in your life are exploring it. And that really matters. And so you are putting out a vibration. And huge numbers of people, if you watch them on the street, it's really hard to see that their vibration is welcoming and community, and that we are one people. And that you at least can be that vibration. You can consciously be present and be offering yourself. I'm curious, who felt by the third time they were sending their vibration, it was differently focused than when I started, especially if you're not used to making an intent with your vibration? Did you feel that freezing the greeting forced you to go, what does he mean by sending the vibration? What the hell is that?
I felt frustrated to not be able to express it.
Well, the thing is, the vibration is expressed. You know, and often the greeting interferes with the vibration, I would suggest. That you see a lot of handshakes that don't have the vibration there, and I'm sure you've received a hug that doesn't have the vibration there, and there's so much of mechanicalness in our communication. And then, obviously, the end of that, where I asked for an explosion, it's wonderful to see that a lot of people, a lot of you don't know each other. Am I correct in saying that? That you were indiscriminately, you were given permission, you were encouraged to, and I'll bet you gave some pretty good hugs to strangers that you might have not normally given to a stranger. And I understand we live in a world where no country in history was ever safe to its women. And I apologize for the behavior of men in history, and that you have to have that caution. And you can be with a group of people to where some of that caution can be pushed down and you can experiment. Because we certainly could use a lot more hugging, a lot more engaged sweetness between each other. How is it, so many of the patients I had, most of them, not so many, most of the patients I had huge longing for contact, for touch, for hugging, for conversation. And how is it that we're ever standing next to somebody that this isn't the first gesture? or this. How is that? And in a clown costume, you can do it that instant. I've done it in 74 countries, and 99% of the people, regardless of whether they're police or whatever they are, that you can do bad things to people as a clown. If you aren't familiar with that, come with me on one of our trips. We do about 8 trips a year. The next exercise was the parallel lines, and it involves 2 parts of life that are both a delight. One is people watching, and I'm curious who would admit that they know they're a professional people watcher. I don't mean you're paid, I mean you're watching. You are, when you sit in a cafe, you choose the seat that's the watcher's seat. In the airport, that when you're walking down the street, that's why I'm not going to do an iPhone, for crying out loud, walking down the street with an iPhone. I'm sorry if I'm not too into those. And we are already so alienated as a species that those things have created so much more alienation from my experience. So, watching, maybe you thought the exercise was just making the faces, but it's also watch. Who could not keep a straight face? Who wasn't going to crack a smile if it cost them their life? I saw a few of those people also. That's great, because that was the assignment, and of course it doesn't work very well when people are making those faces that they're making. And all of those faces were useful if you come clowning with me, by the way. There's none of those faces that aren't useful. So tuck them away. And what do you do, okay? When you're in a cafe, or when you're walking on an airplane, or whatever you're doing, when you see a human face, what do? Do you quickly look away? Unless you're thinking, oh, they're cute. Okay, then it might be longer, but then staring won't help. But why not make a funny face? As soon as your eyes connect with somebody, why not go? And see what happens. That all of those times in our life when we make a connection and the gesture is one of turning off. That the person isn't feeling they just saw a tribal mate. That we are one, we're all here to love each other. But that eye contact, it doesn't follow with a sense of, yeah, we're together. And you can do it, and just watch yourself in that, how often your engagement in the world, that especially if, I think at this conference, it's going to come up at least one time in 10 days that we're all one, right? Is that going to come up?
Yes.
And maybe it already has, for crying out loud, by day 2. And so it's so important to have fun offering. Certainly, who does it with kids, okay? What's the first thing you do when you have your first child? You do more funny faces that year than you ever did in your life. Why? Because normally your face is a little boring. I'm kidding about the boring. They're happy to see the face, but you feel safe with your child, and then often other children if you're a child person, that you can make faces. Who makes faces at stranger kids in airports? You see them and you'll make a strange face because you want the kid to kind of know you're with them. You know, we're buds. And that those faces that you were giving out pretty freely are good. Use them. Use them unwisely. The next exercise I've already talked about, pairing off with a stranger, listening. Stories are fun and interesting. So at least do 1 or 2 kinky things a year that's so strange that people want to hear the story. Okay, just something you did. I like to get presidents in my big underpants, okay, because when you get presidents of countries in your big underpants, it's a story to tell people. And you won't try it probably unless you're in a clown costume. So, in a way, the life is pairing off, that you're next to somebody most of the time, unless you're hiding in your house. You know, it's interesting, a lot of time you're living with somebody and you've drifted apart. Really a dumb idea. Why are you living with them unless you're getting closer? And you can make it your intent to get closer. You can also notice if you're drifting. And then you know it's a really good idea to get closer. You don't have to drift. It is not in the cards that you drift. It is in the lack of the decision to get deeper. The next exercise was exercise. And I think about when I was in medical school, I was that skinny nerd, geek, dork, sissy boy, which aren't normally thought of as people that do much exercise. And so I did not grow up. I'm 6'4". I never played a game of basketball. In my experience of men in sports, it was another way for men to hurt each other. And I definitely wasn't going to do that. But as soon as I became a doctor, I noticed that most patients were not fit. That there are 4 kinds of exercises. There's muscle building, aerobic, joint flexibility, and balance. We don't often think of balance as an exercise, but I know that learning to walk a rope and ride a unicycle made me have a different sense of balance than before those things. But I know pretty much for 45 years I've done aerobics and the yoga exercises and weightlifting, and so I think that's part of why I haven't been sick. And I'm 69 and I work like crazy and fly 300 days a year, and I never feel jet lag or any of those things. And I know how important it is to be and to use your body. We have this negativity to age, and it's really a negativity to good health. It's not, age is not the problem. Not being interested in your health is a problem. And you can be fit. You can be fit even if you're paralyzed from the neck down. You can have one hell of an active head. Okay, I think Stephen Hawking is a really good example of doing the best with what you got. And I love this Japanese man who has no arms and legs and wrote a book, Yes, I Can. Basically, I can do it. And so really, however you can trick yourself, I mentioned last night how we had 2 or 3 nights a week, we had all-night rock and roll parties to trick people into aerobics. We just had to call it a party, have an ethic to dance all night, and not just dance a couple of dances, but really dance a really long time. But now, we weren't saying, this is good for your cardiovascular respiratory system. And you can trick people, and if you can trick people into doing yoga exercises, say, we're not doing any of the meditation, you know, you don't want to scare away people. We're exercising, but you trick them. You're doing the flexibility exercises, and the next thing you know, they're finding some inner peace. And maybe then they go to the next room where the meditation is happening. because most of our patients didn't want any of the things that made them healthy. Cut the crap, doc, give me a pill was the most common phrase from a patient. And it's a very interesting thing about dancing. It's probably as old as our culture, and I would have a patient bring in the music they dance to. I say, bring in music you dance to and dance as long as you can. And I would time it and then invite them to one of our all-night parties. And I found out that the average person in the company of people can dance 3 times longer than they can by themselves. And it's kind of an introduction into feeding off other people's energies. That there's no really simple way to tell a person how to feed off energy. It's so much easier to show them by doing something, that people are happier if they're doing something fun. And so you show them that they feed off other people, much like laying on the floor does. Doesn't matter. When we were the doctors for the largest motorcycle gang in the U.S., we mixed a lot of really different people, and if we were having them all on the floor together, they would do it. And so this idea of helping people find out how to get energy from others, how to take energy. The Native Americans, your First Nation people, they talk about taking energy from a rock, from a tree. And you can. Say, I'm not taking energy from a rock. How big's a rock got to be? Well, if you go out there in the lobby, there's some tiny little rocks. Oh, we polished them, didn't we? Still are rocks. So you can take energy. Those rocks out there are sold as things to give energy, not really to be decorations. And so this taking of energy is really... Who felt in the dance they were a little energized seeing other people dance and being with other people dancing? Because I'm going to guess not all of you are out there dancing every week. By the way, it was for me a really turn from dancing when I was brought up on ballroom dancing because I couldn't get any dates as a young person. But if I went to some ballroom dancing, I could at least hold a girl while I was dancing. And so I grew up doing waltzing and rock and roll. Gave a little demonstration of that earlier, because these were dances of touching people. There's so many dances of not touching people now. My partner and I, we are studying tango. And I can tell you, if you like mush and you've got a partner, take some tango lessons. It's really fun. Dancing when you're holding somebody, especially if you're having trouble getting dates, okay? So it's a tricky way. I tell all guys that don't think they're handsome or that they think they have trouble getting dates, I say, take dance classes. Women love guys who dance, and they're much more forgiving of looks than guys are. So that's a hint to anybody here that's in that situation. The next exercise was the piece of paper and a pen. And this is a really, oh, no, the next exercise was laughing. What am I saying? Ah, ha, 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 ha. And boy, were you into that. Isn't it funny how, and how long, I always wonder, how long would they go on for? And I test it sometimes, just how long will people keep laughing? And people will keep laughing a really long time. And I don't know if you ever do that. I know, who's done laughter yoga? I'll bet a lot of people in this room have done laughter yoga. Is there a leader of laughter yoga here in the course of these 10 days? Laughter yoga, I met Mandan Kataria when he was first starting out as a cardiologist, and laughter yoga, what a funny and sneaky way to get people to laugh, right? Okay, we got to get people laughing. Let's make it a discipline. And the great thing about it is infectious. You can find your infectious laugh, and wherever you go, just burst out laughing, okay? And you can test it. Oh, this is not a laughing place, you know? Funerals? Who's laughed at a funeral, okay? That's why they have wakes, okay? It's kind of it's okay to laugh at the wake part, telling stories of the person who's died and that sort of thing. But laughter is, I love it that there are even mental illnesses of laughter. And it's such a fun thing, this whole laughing world. Laugh, and you can laugh. When I teach clowning, I say, make sure you laugh at least 3 times in public for no reason. Because the fabulous thing about laughter is that everyone thinks you have a reason. No one's going to laugh for no reason. You think of a funny story, you think of a joke, or you watch somebody and you laugh. But no one would think you're just going to go, ha ha ha. So everyone assumes you have a reason. So at least, for the next month, laugh 3 times in public for no reason. At least where one of those, that's 3 times a day, and where one of those places your inner voice says, not here. You're saying, there's no way I'm going to laugh here. And then you laugh there, and you just see what happens. And you can, I love the Japanese laugh. That they're, and you can do hardy, har, 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 or kind of have the asthma laugh. There's just so many fun things to play with in the laughter world. And somebody knows what I'm talking about. So, laugh, and the world laughs with you, or at you, or both. It's funny, laughing at is considered a bad thing. I'm here to be laughed at, okay? I don't have all the toys in my pocket and spread my cheeks and hang the snot because I'm looking, for a deep philosophical discussion, although it's really fun to pull them out during a deep philosophical discussion. Okay, so then the exercise was the piece of paper and the pencil, and this is the God exercise, the exercise of creation. That I think if humans last long enough, as we understand brain biochemistry more, that creativity will maybe even surpass love as a power in a person's life. Because after all, loving is a creative act. And that the act of creation, a lot of, if you read the biographies, autobiographies of a lot of artists, their creativity is so strong, their poverty is often not noticed at all. And so often they're not recognized until they're dead. From what I understand with Einstein, his wife would pack his suitcase and he'd go off, and a lot of times not open it. When he was away 3 or 4 days, he was off doing something. And creativity is such a seduction. I think it's why I'm so disturbed by boredom. I really am. I just am hostile to the television and hostile to our meaningless educational system. This idea that you are a creator. You're a creator with how you make bread. You're a creator with how you do your exercises. I'm sure no 2 people meditate the same. No 2 people pray to the same God. That it's all an act of creation from you. And that it is thrilling to be a creator. And I always walk around, I love seeing people. I just wondered, I wish I had pictures of people so that they could show your friends to see that that's what they did with piece of paper, sticking things in their nose and that sort of thing, because you may not be people that normally, like me, who do stick things in their nose. So this act of creation is so important. I think that I truly feel that I could be paralyzed from the neck down and my life would be no less creative. That creativity is a giant well and gift to life. That how you walk down the street, if you know Monty Python's Ministry of Silly Walks, just for fun, this next year, each week, walk completely differently than any of the other weeks. So you can walk like this sideways down the street. You can walk like this. Just decide to be how you sit down in a restaurant. And before long, you might find yourself in every moment making offerings of yourself in a creative life. In the last exercise, gratitude. I love seeing people woven on the floor. I think it'd be fun if businesses did that to open their day, where they were all leaning against each other and woven into each other's bodies and wiggling. It wasn't that, who liked the wiggling part? Because you're all connected, and you can say when everyone's in a chair in an auditorium that we're all connected, but actually in that moment it's a philosophical connection, and that when you are all physically connected, it's such a beautiful thing. I also see gratitude. I'm going to give 2 strategies for being happy, 2 things that I did in deciding to be happy and how I've made that in my life. And one of the strategies is gratitude, that you can always be bathed in the gratitude for all of the things that are meaningful to you. And I estimate, and I'm sure I could list 10 billion things I'm grateful for. So I do love poetry, and maybe I will impose some Walt Whitman on you, that the several thousand books of poetry in my library, I wish I knew days of poetry by
Sing one
heart.
now.
Okay, I will. Thank you for that stimulus.
It was quite boiling
Okay.
time.
This is such a good poem for the subject. I won't give you the whole poem. It's about 24 minutes. Okay, it's by Walt Whitman, who is probably one of the most influential writers of my lifetime. It's probably the strongest gift I've given myself is I've read gigantic, I'm sure 10,000 or more of the great novels and poems. More important than loving.
You have to be healthy.
Nope.
Is anyone here unhealthy and loving? I think actually I come from a place as a doctor where I see a huge number of healthy people, and it's part of my goal to let them know they can have everything they want and keep their disease.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so it's nice to be healthy. In asking about 50 million people, maybe 10 have raised their hand. So I think that by and large, this is in 74 countries, and by and large, loving is held up as the most important thing in life, the verbing of love. And what's interesting is not a single public school in the world teaches 1 hour K through 12 of the most important thing in life. The most important thing in life, not 1 hour. No medical school in the world teaches compassion. Okay? They might have a Saturday elective class. So here, how dumb are we? There's an intelligence to loving. If you're good at loving, it's an intelligence. And this could be taught. Imagine, I've worked for 20 years all over the world to get a single school, a school system, a city, a state, a country to be the first ever to teach love as an intelligence, K through 12, 1 hour a day, 5 days a week for 13 years. like they teach mathematics, which is on nobody's list as the most important thing in life. So it's so bizarre to me. In fact, I think one way that social control has pushed love down is they've made it a feeling. And the feelings of love are interesting, but if you're good at it, it's an intelligence. Just watch a mother, say in a war zone, or a refugee camp, or in poverty, and you'll see a quality of intelligence that is, unbelievable. So I think those are partly, loving is bad business. The next thing you know is you're going to start giving things away. You're going to want everyone well fed. Where the ethic is concentrate as much money in your hand and much power over others in your hand. That is the ethic of the world, of the people who own the world. There's no government on the planet I respect. And so I think these are, there's such a celebration of unhappiness. It's almost a bragging in the world that people are struggling, or the definition of happiness is a narrow one, so you're happy if you're young, and if you're aging, there's so many traps that are out there. The whole advertising community is about having you feel lesser and needing something that you don't have. So I think it's actually a really long discussion, this celebration of misery that the world has. It is certainly a great way to control our society. I mean, we murdered 2 million Iraqi people for money, and our nation didn't do anything except murder. It's good business. But if you're depressed, I can't. It's the chant of our modern society. And it's so healthy for the capitalist system to be miserable. It's good business. Yes, sir.
Not. Thank you. Emotion, not just as an emotion, but from the very creative core of existence, which we are a product of. This is what in yoga is called the Anandamaya Kosha. Ananda is a state of bliss. And that's where the stuff that's why we're looking for happiness, because that's a hidden, inherent, evolutionary need. And that's what we need to resurface. And that's what your work is doing. And we are very thankful to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just have one more thing?
Okay. I didn't hear a question, so
Another question.
It was just a comment. I think.
thank you.
Yeah. And Azalia is here, the girl that you danced with. She's got cerebral palsy. And she had the courage to come here. She's been doing yoga with me. She's doing a teacher training program. She can't speak, but she writes so beautifully. And she's done a teacher training presentation as a class. What would you like to just say a word for her?
Hell of a dancer. Hell of a dancer. Something I love, we don't know each other, but I knew as a dancer of a lot of dancing that it was safe to do what I did with you. And I'm sure some were worried. Raise your hand if you were honestly worried in throwing her around. Okay, not everyone's going to raise their hand that was worried. I wasn't worried. And it wasn't because I wasn't worried. You gave me the confidence to do things to you that I'm not sure many in the room would have tried. You, by your own projection, gave me the freedom to grab you. Thank you.
J'ai eu le goût de l'essayer. J'ai eu le goût de l'essayer. I want to try.
J'ai le goût d'essayer de danser avec...
You would like to
Dance step, don't dance. And you can learn tango in 10 minutes and dance it for 50 years and still have new steps to learn. And it's one of the, I think all of the art forms. In our school, I hate in our school systems that they say, you're not an artist, you're not a singer, you're not a dancer. Everyone is an artist, everyone is a poet. You know, it's the commercial nature of them that make people think that they're not. And so you know, part of why I grabbed you for dancing is to show people they can dance with you. They don't have to be frightened of it. I wasn't frightened at all. The one thing I wondered when I picked you up, did that hurt you?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay. I didn't know if that would, but I was moved to, and again, a lot of it was the projection of safety that I felt from you, and thank you. And you had a question.
Yes.
Well, I think we were with permaculture when it began, and we've been farmers from the very beginning, and I mentioned last night an organic farm, and I mean, one of the things, West Virginia, and it's a problem all over the U.S., the big problems in West Virginia are obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, and crystal meth. And so those are the big problems in West Virginia. It's the poorest state. And so we want to get the land next door to us and basically grow, it's the poorest state, and grow food and have cooks that will go into the houses with people with free food to show them possibilities. And you know, it's one way to cut the cost is to grow a lot of your own food. And so I was a goat herder for 7 years. And so we're going to do it all. Yes, ma'am. Yum, and you don't change West Virginia eating habits just because the food on the table is nutritious. They won't eat it. So you have to do a lot of trickery. And that's why I learned that a cook was very different than a chef. And that there are people who can make foods and the person, I don't eat that stuff. They go, what is this stuff? This is good. So we use the seduction approach to food. Seduce them. Yes, ma'am.
Patch, two things good news was a number of years ago.
Down to David, taquitos. Have you set that up down there? I don't know if you know, in 3 days I'm in Iquitos.
Taquitos, yeah.
We've been a project there for 9 years.
Okay,
So.
I'm in the Sacred Valley of Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Somebody else want to? Okay, yes.
Partly, we're free and we don't accept any insurance. So we don't want anything from our government. I mean, I've gotten in trouble with the government. I mean, in my youth, I got in trouble for, let's just call it hippie reasons. And, you know, it's amazing to me. We were never sued. We were never, and I think partly was we took care of a lot of the dangerous parts of the population and the motorcycle gang, and so I think we were left alone because they liked what we did and we didn't cost anybody any money. We were the only doctors that would make house calls on patients, and so we were, you know, a good reputation can get you a lot of things. And I think that that's partly what happened. So I don't know about, you know, I'm pretty public that I'm here to overthrow the capitalist system. You know, I'm pretty critical of things and I speak up a lot, but it hasn't gotten me killed yet or arrested for, I have been arrested at political protests, nuclear power plants, but those, you know, those aren't really arrests, they're just a moment of irritating the officials. Yes, this side of the room. You hear me say that every problem in history is due to men. It actually is true. And that I do think that most men are dangerous to women. I hate to say that, but when you have 4-hour interviews with women, you hear it. And then if you look at the statistics, my youngest case of gonorrhea is 3. And so, yes, absolutely. I'm really, the world could be a different place if men were loving. I think most men have no idea about loving. I think most men have never really had a woman friend. And that we aren't inherently bad, but the messages we get in growing up on how to be a man are horrible messages. Where does one get a message to be a soft, gentle, wimpy, pathetic? I was kidding about the pathetic, but you understood that. And so, yes, absolutely. I don't want people to hear me condemning men and think I don't like them. I ache. I ache for how lonely men are. Their quality of loneliness is astounding. And being in, you know, I've corresponded with over 300 men on death row. I have intentionally put myself around men who do horrible things to people to try to understand. And all the men I wrote on death row, none of them had my mother. If you have my mother, you're not going to hurt people. And I think that the schools are the strongest place we have for social change. And they could be magical palaces of change. Imagine how differently we would be if love was taught as an intelligence 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, K through 12. Because I take men on clown trips and teach them loving. And they love it. Like this beautiful man we saw. What a guy.
Yeah.
My future teacher for seahorses. You know, that you were outside when I was saying, I say, you're the kind of man I want men to be. You're not a mean person, are you? I'm with you. We're going to do something together. Yes, sir.
Can you tell stories about some of the schools where you taught love?
Well, I do a workshop called What is Your Love Strategy? I haven't gotten in, I'm getting this close. There are now a few places where last night I showed the pictures of Alaska who was raped and had the saddest face of a child I ever saw. And the Minister of Health was there. I don't think I told actually that story. That because of that exchange, they're now offering us, believe it or not, $100,000 to come down and work with their medical schools to teach compassion.
Wow.
So, we constantly knock on the door and don't give up when it isn't sustained. You know, unfortunately, anyone who's tried a project, and I think that's why there are far fewer projects than need to be, is that people don't know how to take the fire to a project. And that they don't understand how I've stuck to a hospital for 44 years and haven't even built the first building. Okay, ha ha ha. dream the impossible dream to fight the unbeatable foe. So how to dive into it and have the meaning of the project be a fountain of energy for you. And so there are homeschoolers that I know that have taught loving. Italy so far has been the country closest to letting us do a thing we call educare. And so it's those, whatever step you take. For me, mentioning it here is a step. Because what's so interesting is if you do share ideas with people, you can, if you live long enough, someone will contact and say, I heard you talk 30 years ago and I did this, and I knew nothing about it. So, have conversations about important things. Be ready. My education library is 800 or 900 books. If you want to read Nell Noddings, her 4 books, Caring, Happiness in Education, Starting at Home, and Critical Lessons, it's a giant start to think about teaching love in schools. Because we know by 8th grade probably one whole day would be to the class on loving, and the other class would be the other day, and you'd be, by 8th grade, you'd be going out in the community and being with people who are by themselves alone at home as elders, or, it would be field work by 8th grade. Fabulous, unbelievable, where they would be going to school for loving. It feels good, never gets tiring. Okay, let me just see, because I've kind of put my butt to that into the room. Okay, okay, yeah.
Just if people are interested, I'm a teacher, and I do some of this stuff. And I do laughter yoga and things like that. So
Fabulous.
if you want to have any information, I'm on the South Shore of Montreal. And I
She's
do
saying,
alternative stuff.
yeah, and normally when you want people to just say it louder, or I can try to repeat it. She is a teacher. She's doing some of that stuff, and laughter yoga. Talk to her.
Right.
And can you see her face so that you know? Okay. Yes.